It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Taxi for Lammy, an extraordinary £600 taxi fare, 600 miles, 6.5 hours from Italy to a ski resort in the south of France. It is incredible how downhill British foreign policy has going. Now, the police are involved. The matter is before the courts. Let me quickly add that David Lammy might be completely blameless, but it does say a thing or two about his foreign policy ability. The Hungarian Air Force is in the skies and they're shooting down Ukrainian drones, and Hungarian tanks are on the move. Is Viktor Orban and EU and NATO's Hungary about to invade Ukraine from the southwest? And in a multi-trillion-dollar jamboree, complete with YMCA being played in Saudi Arabia, just a few miles from the two holy mosques, it's the meeting of all time. It is the handshake of all time. He's young, he's attractive, he's got a strong past, a very strong past, says President Donald Trump of the deputy head of ISIS and formerly the deputy head of Al-Qaeda. Who said Al-Qaeda and ISIS were constructs of the Western Empire? Well, I think I probably did. There's much more coming up over the course of the next 2 hours. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Now, anyone can get into a row with a taxi driver. I've been in one or two myself, but what a taxi journey. David Lammy and his missus, at public expense, were in Italy for King Charles's state visit to that country. I don't know why. I don't know why King Charles was on that visit. I don't know why David Lammy had to be there. There were rather a few important things going on in the world at the time, but leave that to one side. Why David Lammy had to take a taxi from Italy to a ski resort in France is a very great mystery, and an even bigger mystery is who was going to pay for it, or whether it was paid for at all. The taxi driver is suing the British Foreign Secretary for more than £600 in an unpaid taxi bill. He says David Lammy is accusing him of having stolen cash and luggage belonging to the happy couple. Very happy when you can take a taxi from Italy to France. Now, I've no idea who's right and who's wrong. Both reported it to the local police station, who must have wished that the British visitor had not descended amongst them. But the outcome sums up to me the downhill course of British foreign policy. I've said to you before that David Lammy is without doubt the most undistinguished occupant of the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office there has ever been since the establishment of that august place all those centuries ago. This man is the Idi Amin of British politics, yet he blunders around like the original Idi Amin, with his ham-fisted, mutton-chopped, increasingly corpulent being, wrecking Britain's relations with most of the world. The European Union doesn't like us much. Didn't like us even when we were in it. Definitely don't like us since we left. And he has single-handedly sought to bring about further wreckage in every part of the world where Britain has legitimate interests, where British people have to travel and have to do business. It's about time. It was taxi for Lammy, and Keir Starmer is a fool if he does not realise this. This taxigate may be the last straw for Idi Amin. But there's much more important things going on in the world just in the last half hour. So I'm having to scrap what I was going to say to you. A remarkable situation has arisen whereby a member of the European Union, a member of NATO, the Republic of Hungary, whose Prime Minister Viktor Orban is a constant thorn in the flesh of both NATO and the European Union, because he insists that he does not want Hungary to be at war with Russia. Hungary may be in the process right now of invading Ukraine from its southwest. 24 hours ago or so, Hungarian tanks were on the move near the Ukrainian border. I thought this a very peculiar development. Then earlier today, it was reported that the Hungarian Air Force had shot down 2 Ukrainian drones in Hungarian airspace. And now I see breaking news footage of the Hungarian Air Force in the air over the borderland between Hungary and Ukraine. Now, sharp-eyed viewers will know that I've been telling you for some time that both Hungary and Romania, and actually also Poland, all have territorial demands on what was the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine. In Hungary's case, it is the Transcarpathian region. There, the people speak Hungarian. They are actually Hungarian people, but they have been trapped inside the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic since the end of the Second World War, and Hungary wants the territory back. And I guess Viktor Orban, in for a penny, in for a pound, is seizing the opportunity of Ukraine playing funny games with Hungary's sovereignty to strike back and to strike a blow for his compatriots in the Transcarpathian region. If Simeon wins the presidency of Romania, you can be sure that he will not wait long to raise the demands of the Romanian population, equally trapped inside the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine, and perhaps demand the return of those territories. And Poland, well, all of Ukraine used to be in Poland. This is an important truth that I've told you many times, but maybe the historical and geographical complexities have not entirely dawned on every one of you. Ukraine did not exist, would only ever have existed, but for the Soviet Union, but for Stalin, actually, and then Khrushchev, who added territory after territory, including Crimea, to the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine. There is no Ukraine. That's the truth of the matter. Ukraine means the edge, the borderland of the Russian state. Kiev used to be the capital city of Russia. The Russian emperor sat in a palace in Kiev. Why am I laboring these apparently obscure historical points? Well, you've been led to believe that Ukraine is an historic and concise, contiguous piece of territory that has forever been Ukraine, that forever speaks Ukrainian, but it doesn't. In Lvov, they speak Polish. In Transcarpathia, they speak Hungarian. In other parts of the country, they speak Romanian. And of course, famously, in more than 1/3 of the territory, they speak Russian. It was the Bolsheviks that created Ukraine, and yet it is the new Bolsheviks in the Kremlin, as the West like to describe them, that are taking the rap, the blame for the current mess. Which brings me to Istanbul, where actually I could have been today, but I'm not, because I simply have to get home to see my children. But if I had been in Istanbul today, I would not be expecting President Vladimir Putin to arrive. There never was any declaration that President Putin would go to Istanbul. Instead, he sent two of his most senior men, including his most senior man, Sergei Lavrov, the doyen of foreign ministers, the greatest foreign minister on the planet, is there in Istanbul, ready to conduct negotiations with Zelensky or anyone else that Zelensky deputizes, delegates the right to negotiate to. Now, Zelensky is lying when he tells you that only he can negotiate on behalf of Ukraine. But insofar as there's any question about that, that's because Zelensky himself passed a law making it illegal for any Ukrainian official to negotiate with Russia. He says that he is exempt from that law, but in truth, he is not. So either nobody in Ukraine is entitled to negotiate with the Russians, or anybody in Ukraine is entitled to negotiate with the Russians. Although by far the best way of resolving this conundrum is for Ukraine to have a free and fair presidential election to elect a president with the mandate to negotiate peace and an end to the Ukraine war. I don't expect any of that to happen, because if there was a free and fair presidential election in Ukraine, Zelensky would lose it in a landslide. And I mean a landslide. I mean the kind of landslide that would happen if Keir Starmer were to go back to the country less than 1 year after having succeeded in securing a record parliamentary majority. Never in the history of political conflict in Britain has any Prime Minister so comprehensively lost the nation so soon after having won it. Mind you, only 20% of the British electors even voted for him in the general election less than 1 year ago, 10 months ago. Only 32% of the people who actually voted for him. But he got a record parliamentary majority because of the monstrosity of the political electoral system in Britain. And we, the Workers' Party, which got the best part of 250,000 votes, did not get one single seat in return. But Keir Starmer got many hundreds of seats. But if he were to go to the polls tomorrow, having betrayed the farmers, having betrayed the old age pensioners, having betrayed the waspy women, the 1950s women who were cheated out of 5 years of retirement, having betrayed the armed forces, do you know what happened today? It was revealed that the Royal Navy, which is now down to 8 surface warships, when I was a Member of Parliament for a Royal Navy warship building yard, Yarrows on the Clyde, our ambition was a 23 surface ship fleet. Now we have 8 at sea. We have 1 working aircraft carrier. But today it was revealed that that aircraft carrier has had no working plumbing for months, and that the sailors aboard it have not had a hot shower in months. So let's go to war. Maybe we can stink the Russians out. We've got a floating coffin that doesn't even have hot running water aboard for the sailors. But these are not the only people that Keir Starmer has betrayed. It would take me all night to adumbrate all the promises that he has broken, all the people that he has betrayed. But I don't, frankly, have time, because I need to get on to quite the most extraordinary night in Riyadh last evening, and repeated now in Doha this afternoon. But let's start with last evening. To the strains of YMCA by the Village People, a global gay anthem, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and Donald Trump rocked the night away. I don't know if His Royal Highness, Prince MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, there was no sign of his father, the King. Perhaps he didn't like the song list that had been chosen. But MBS and Donald Trump engaged in an orgy, not a YMCA-style orgy, but an orgy of flattery and mutual backslapping. But the bill for it was paid by the people of Saudi Arabia, who gave Donald Trump $1.4 trillion. $1.4 trillion. From a country that has not been able to deliver a glass of clean water, from a country that has not been able to deliver a piece of bread to the famine-stricken people of Gaza this whole 2 years. They gave $1.4 trillion to the United States of America. Now, it's not clear in what form this money is going to be delivered. One part of it is going to be delivered in the biggest ever arms deal. Now, Saudi Arabia doesn't really have an army. It doesn't really have an air force. It doesn't really have a navy. Saudi Arabia has foreign mercenaries, including British and American mercenaries, operating what military equipment they do have. But it's not at all clear what they're going to do with another $145 billion worth of military hardware. This is not really military spending. This is protection money. This is the kind of money you pony up for Tony Soprano in exchange for him not wrecking your joint, in exchange for him not allowing anybody else to wreck your joint. It's a protection racket, no more, no less. Who's Saudi Arabia going to fight with its brand new offensive weapons capability? The poorest people in the world? In Yemen? The people in Yemen who are the only people in the entire Arab world still standing, still fighting to relieve the siege on Gaza, which all international organizations now describe as a state of famine. That's F-A-M-I-N-E, famine. Yes, in 2025, when trillions are being thrown on the table, the roulette table, in Riyadh, in Doha, when trillions are being ponied up for President Soprano, famine is cutting a swathe through the Gaza Strip. You see the world we're living in? You see how grotesque all of this is? And then there was the handshake, the mother of all handshakes, and then the explanation of it today. Let me put my cards on the table because I don't have the same position on this as some others that are politically generally aligned with me. I welcome the United States lifting the sanctions on the people of Syria. Not because I support the people who are in practice, de facto, their government now. I oppose them, always, from the first and until the last. But I can't wish even more misery on the Syrian people by a continuation of economic sanctions against them. I also recognize that Jolani is the de facto, for the time being at least, president of Syria. He doesn't need my recognition. He is in effective control of the presidential palace, though it would not appear in control of all armed bodies of men, which is usually a precondition for being recognized as a government. He can't be in control of every armed body of men, otherwise he would be responsible for the massacre of Christians, for the massacre of Alawites, for the massacre of Druze, for the massacre of minorities of all kinds, even minorities within his own part of Islam, the Sunni Islamic tendency. He can't be in control of that. Otherwise, nobody would be giving him tens of billions in order to rebuild the country. But that means if he's not in control of them, he's not actually in control of the whole territory. But I don't know exactly which of those two options is accurate. What I do know is that the Syrian people are hungry. The Syrian people have endured decades now of misery in a long civil war, a war in which one of the civil war parties was backed by the Western Empire to the tune of hundreds of millions, maybe more, in terms of money, to the tune of every piece of weaponry they could possibly carry in the pickup trucks that they mysteriously acquired, and was, of course, also buttressed by thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of foreign jihadist fighters from every part of the Muslim world, and indeed not a few from the Western world. I recognize that Jolani is in control. I recognize that the Syrian people need relief from sanctions. I recognize, therefore, that Western governments are going to, one after the other, meet with and shake hands with Jolani. What I found impossible to accept was Donald Trump's explanation on board Air Force One. It'll soon be Air Force Two because the Qataris have given him the world's biggest and best aircraft to be the new Air Force One. And I'll come back to them in a minute. Donald Trump, when asked how his meeting with Jolani had gone, said this: he's a young man, a very attractive young man, a man with a strong past, a very strong past. If I tell you that 20 years ago, to the day, this day, 20 years ago, Jolani was carted off to an American prison as the deputy leader of Al-Qaeda. You know, the Al-Qaeda that brought down the Twin Towers in the United States, or at least that's the official story. The Al-Qaeda that cut people's throats on camera, including American citizens, including British citizens, including citizens from most countries in the Western world. The Al-Qaeda that cut open people's chests and ate their hearts. The Al-Qaeda that crucified people. That Al-Qaeda. The Al-Qaeda that spawned ISIS. Who was the deputy leader of ISIS? No less than this very attractive, very strong, tough young man that Donald Trump was cavorting with last evening. It's either a grotesque failure of memory on the part of the United States of America about the mass murder of their own people. If Al-Qaeda brought down the Twin Towers, that would explain the $10 million bounty on Jolani's head until 7 weeks ago in the United States. He was wanted, dead or alive, $10 million reward, because he was the deputy leader of Al-Qaeda, because he was the deputy leader of ISIS. But now, he's a very attractive, strong, young man. Seriously, Donald? I don't know if Jolani danced to YMCA in that orgy in Riyadh last evening. But if he did, it wouldn't be the strangest thing about what happened yesterday. It's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As vicious as the Twitter sphere, where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I'm sorry that monologue went on rather longer than it should have. I couldn't see the clock that would have told me to keep quiet, but I hope it was worthwhile in any case. We've got a poll tonight. Should Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize? Who comes up with these polls? Should Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize? Yes or no? You can answer, you can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. If you are watching on the YouTube stream, please make sure you subscribe to my channel and you give the show the thumbs up. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada. The number there is +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the British Isles, in Britain and in Ireland, 08081 965522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. 15,000 people have voted on that, and a surprising number say that Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize. Let's see where that poll stands at the end of the night. Now, a good friend of the show and a man that I spent some time with in Iran just the other day is Glenn Diesen. He is the professor at the University of Southeastern Norway and editor at Russia in Global Affairs. And he's our first guest, I'm glad to say, this evening. Glenn, welcome to the show. All roads lead to Istanbul for tomorrow's talks, or do they? Are there going to be talks? Who's going to be talking, and what are they going to be talking about?
Well, yes, good to be on your program, George. Yes, good to see you again. Now, yeah, this is a great question. I think the reason why there's a lot of confusion around this is obviously because there's a lot of dishonesty. I think it's hard to see how they're approaching this as an honest broker. That is, after 3 years of boycotting all diplomacy, suddenly, the Europeans, imposed this ultimatum, and we need a sudden 30-day unconditional ceasefire, which means no political settlement. Zelensky says he will negotiate with the Russians, but only with Putin, and they have to meet in person, and they only have a few days to organize this. A lot of this seems dishonest, but again, I think a lot of it's also intended to show or to control the narrative, to suggest that Zelensky is the one who really wants peace. So forget about the last 3 years of not wanting to talk to the Russians, because the Russians will not comply with these demands. That is an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, or Putin meeting Zelensky on a short notice, that the Russians aren't interested in diplomacy. So I think this is the main reason why there's some confusion around this. But again, if they can meet at least some delegation from Russia and Ukraine face to face, I think this will be progress after 3 years of not talking to each other.
Well, Mr. Lavrov is hardly an unimpressive stand-in, is he? He is the, I think, most senior foreign policy man, the most senior seasoned diplomat, probably in the world, but certainly in the conflict we're talking about. Why would the Ukrainians not want to talk to Mr. Lavrov?
Well, there is no reason. And again, the idea that negotiations are done between two presidents, it doesn't really make much sense. Usually you would have a negotiation team, flesh out all the details, work out the main problems, and then you would have the political leadership perhaps come in towards the end for the handshakes and the official stuff. But indeed, it's often recognized that if you introduce two high-end diplomats early on, it could cause political problems, disruptions, to the extent that it would undermine negotiations. So this is not, this seems like a political show. It's political theater to control the narrative, signal to Trump, for example, that Zelensky does want to negotiate. This was a key reason why you had that big fight in the Oval Office, that Zelensky made it abundantly clear he didn't want to talk to the Russians. And now, of course, they have to sell it that the Ukraine really, really wants to talk to Russians, but it's Russia that doesn't want this, because whoever doesn't want to make peace with the other side will probably, get to face Trump's fury. This is the main idea. So it's theatrics, unfortunately.
Is Zelensky telling the truth when he says that under Ukrainian law, a law which he himself introduced, literally only he can negotiate, that no other official of Ukraine is legally entitled to?
No. And indeed, from the Russian perspective, they even question his legitimacy. They fear that if they sign anything with Zelensky, that this will be considered to be not valid later on, given that his presidential mandate has run out. But I think that this is also a reaction from Zelensky because he fears for his legitimacy. Indeed, many people assume that the war will likely end with a regime change in Ukraine when the government collapses. So given that Trump has also previously, not at the moment, challenged the legitimacy of Zelensky, given that the Russians challenge his legitimacy, there is some concern. Also, now that the war is not going well, you will have some uprising either from the nationalists or the military, or even the public, which is less likely because they have been weakened. But nonetheless, there's a concern about the legitimacy. So it could be merely that Zelensky would like to elevate his own position, but it's also maybe a concern that someone will go over his head. But no, there's no reason why he should put himself at the center of this.
Well, it looks like, or sounds like, Professor, I made the right decision not traveling to Istanbul today. Although if it all comes good and Trump flies in from the Persian Gulf and peace breaks out, I'll have made the wrong choice. But it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. Can you help us with what is taking place right now in the southwest of Ukraine, with Hungary appearing to be on a war footing and Ukrainian drones being shot down in Hungarian territory?
Well, this, of course, it's very hard to read the situation this early, but there's no secret that there's some tensions between Ukraine and Hungary. And the main problem for Ukraine now, given the huge power of the nationalists since 2014, is not only that the nationalists are very anti-Russian in terms of seeking to nationalize and de-Russify Ukraine. They have also limited a lot of the rights of other minorities, the Hungarian being a key one. So for the Hungarians, they've been very, very worried about this for a long time. And instead of the EU hasn't backed them up, of course, they've taken the side of Zelensky against, well, one of their own. And also you have the Ukraine's disruption to Hungary's energy supplies. So there's a lot of tensions which have been growing. And it's also the assumption, at least, well, then you're speculating perhaps, but I do believe that if Ukraine will begin to fall apart, that Hungary might also claim some of these territories, which used to be a part of Hungary, which are populated by Hungarians, who they seem have been discriminated by under Kiev, not just Zelensky, but especially since 2014. So if Ukraine begins to unravel, it's worth noting that all of these neighbors, they are not living all in harmony. Indeed, it's quite possible that Poland would lay claims to cities such as Lvov or even Romania. You have some groups which lay claims to part of Ukraine. I know it's not a popular thing to say in the West, but Ukraine was to some extent built as an artificial state. If you see the territory it had and how it was put together. Now, why was it put together like this? Some argue this was on purpose to prevent nationalism, if you will, to put in different parts. But if it falls apart, it's quite possible that other countries will begin to go in and strip parts of it. And it's also worth noting that Hungary has been quite vocal that it does not want to fight this war against Russia, so it's opposing some of NATO's more belligerent posture. It's also been negative towards the European Union financing the war, and saying that they won't take a part of this. So Hungary is beginning to see more and more as a direct challenge, not necessarily just to Ukraine, but also to Zelensky himself. So, and given that both Orban as well as Fico have been essentially breaking with what the EU believed was the international isolation of Russia. The tensions have been growing for quite some time, you hear the Hungarians as well. They don't have anything kind to say about Zelensky anymore, and this goes both ways.
The Russians are very far from isolated nowadays, are they? You had, despite extraordinary pressure, the journey to Moscow last Friday for Victory Day parade by the Prime Minister of Slovakia and the President of Serbia, who got a hero's welcome on his return to Belgrade, standing ovations everywhere, massively popular, his decision to proceed to Moscow despite threats and even travel disruptions caused by European countries, albeit small ones, refusing to allow their presidential or governmental planes to fly over their territory. You've got Orban alongside, who wasn't in Moscow, but who takes roughly the same position on Ukraine. And we've got President Simeon to come in the upcoming Romanian elections. That's quite a cluster. That's 80 million people. That's more or less the population of Germany, which will be within the EU's theatre of operations, within NATO's theatre of operations, and which will be hostile to the European Union's prevailing orthodoxy on this subject.
Well, it's worth noting that this isn't an isolated incident of petty leaders who wants to prevent them from participating in the Victory Day commemoration in Moscow. This is a wider phenomenon, which is the whole idea that you shouldn't, that peace doesn't derive from mutual understanding and again, visiting each other, diplomacy. It's quite extraordinary that this is something now which isn't permitted. You see this among our political class. The fact that they didn't even pick up the phone and call Moscow for 3 years while all of these hundreds of thousands of men died on the battlefield. They did nothing. But they even took pride in this, that no, we don't talk to Russia. As Kaja Kallas would say, again, the EU foreign policy, or sorry, the let's call it chief of diplomacy, who doesn't believe in diplomacy, say, we don't talk to war criminals, so we don't talk to the Russians, but casually makes threats about breaking up the country. This whole idea that you don't talk to the opposing side. Not only is it enough that politicians do this, but they push this on journalists, on academics, that also you shouldn't, you don't talk to your opponent. This is a negative thing. Wars, weapons are the path to peace. The diplomacy is treasonous. So this is a very strange, it's a strange approach. And you see this now, of course, of all things. This shouldn't be that controversial to attend the memory of the Red Army's defeat of Nazi Germany. I thought, this could be a unifier, something to remind us we actually used to be on the same side. And, again, used to. But no, I see this as being a key problem. But you mentioned a few of these countries now in Eastern Europe, from Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, where there's growing sentiments against the war. But you see this in Western Europe too. It's just that we call them radical left or right, but it's interesting that it's the center that has become quite radical. If you see Germany, AfD actually wants to restart diplomacy with the Russians to make peace with them. Now they're being criminalized. Le Pen also wants a more moderate position towards Russia, also criminalized. It's across the board. I think there's a failure to recognize the basic national interests of their own country. So you're creating now a huge political vacuum with new political forces emerging. And as you see now with the EU, they aren't sure how to react to this. So it goes from, again, criminalizing the opposition to blocking your airspace, or as with Orban when he went to Kiev and Moscow to try to start some diplomacy. They actually punished him. elected leader in Europe simply because he didn't fall in line. It's a very dangerous path we're going down in Europe when all dissent, all opposition to this war must be punished and punished.
Yes, indeed. There is a new dichotomy today. Macron appeared to say that Ukraine can expect no more weapons from France, that their armory is empty, and that they would be endangering their own personal individual security as a country by giving more. At the same time, the new German Chancellor, Herr Merz, declared that he intends to make the Bundeswehr, the German army, the most powerful army in Europe. Now, for people my age and people from countries like yours, the idea of a very powerful German army, the most powerful army in Europe, doesn't actually fall like music on the ears, does it?
No, and I think this is, spoke to a German member of the EU Parliament. He was making the same point. The idea that the Western Europeans are now all, chummy and we wouldn't mind a powerful Germany. I think this would change if you see a very powerful German army, one that doesn't... We saw how a lot of opposition built up against the Germans when they were using their economic power through this round, or especially around the global financial crisis. If they begin to project their power more through military force, I think it's going to bring up some very bad memories indeed. So I think this is a very bad way to go. But again, it just shows how Germany has been turned on its head. Only a few years ago now, Germany was the country who had learned from the history. It wouldn't, resort that much to military force anymore. It was the economic engine of Europe. Now, of course, it's in economic decline. It's struggling. It's deindustrializing. What remains of its industries are being lured across the Atlantic with subsidies from the United States. And at this point, when they're going through economic crisis, they come up with this great idea of military Keynesianism. So let's just build weapons until we're wealthy. This is, really concerning stuff. And I think, but even they take the different approaches. That is, the Germans are still saying that Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible, suggesting that there can't be any peace with Russia, as this is the core demand of the Russians. While from Macron, he's recognizing that there's not that much weapons left to be sent, and also even Ukraine realizes that they're not going to get all their territories back. So what are we doing here? We know that we lost the war. That is NATO's war on Russia. It's been lost. We ran out of weapons and we ran out of Ukrainians. And even though the situation goes from bad to worse every day we delay it, there's still no negotiations. There's nothing. And again, that's why I'm very critical of how the Europeans are framing this new peace effort. It's all nonsense, I think. This focus that has to be unconditional ceasefire. The whole idea is simply that they don't want to discuss any political settlements. In other words, the conflict won't be solved. They're just going to buy some time so they can rebuild some industries, pump in some more weapons, possibly strengthen some defensive lines and prolong the war. It's quite maddening. Even if we could defeat the Russians, what exactly would this look like? How would you defeat the world's largest nuclear power in a struggle which Russia considers to be an existential threat? So no, I don't think a heavily militarized Germany is the solution that Europe really needs at this moment.
A splendid tutorial. Professor Glenn Diesen, thank you very much for providing it. That's Professor Glenn Diesen of the University of Southeastern Norway and editor at Russia in Global Affairs. Let me take a quick break and then your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. It's the mother of...
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got that on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published, but actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
Now, you get that film and our earlier film, The Killings of Tony Blair, if you support us on Patreon. You get it free, patreon.com/George Galloway. I'm deeply grateful to the people who have solidly and now for long supported the show through the Patreon page, patreon.com/George Galloway. Thank you very much indeed for following us. RB is in Canada, wants to talk Trump and peace. Who wouldn't? Go ahead, RB.
Hello, George. How am I coming in?
All good, loud and clear, sir.
Awesome, good, because I'm driving my truck to Winnipeg this afternoon to take a load of lumber. And so I was taking a look at this situation.
Drive safely, man.
Yeah, I will, thank you. I was looking at the situation of Trump and his idea of peace. I think it's a little bit cockeyed. I really don't think he knows what he's doing. He's trying. Maybe his instincts are good. But if he really wanted peace in the Middle East, he would just take a phone call to Benjamin Netanyahu. That it's over with. There's no more weapons coming, and it's time to pull your army out of Gaza and the West Bank, get a hold of your settlers, crack down on Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and those crazy right-wing lunatics in your coalition, and allow supplies and aid into Gaza, and it's over with. It's done. That's all he would have to do, and he has the power to do it. The United States has the power to bring peace in the Middle East. This whole rigmarole of the Abraham Accords and flirting around with these with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and all these dictatorships over there is just doing more dancing around the bush as it's on fire. And as far as Ukraine goes, again, the Americans, if Trump wanted to, he could strong arm Zelensky into meeting Putin and coming up with a solution that would take care a diplomatic solution. It's possible. It just requires the will of the Americans to do it. The thing I have a problem with is I think Trump is being undermined at every turn by the neocon forces that surround him, and Trump only seems to be able to take any action is with the last person in the room who has his ear. So I don't think Trump is in any control of the situation. And when it comes to Ukraine, the person who will decide when the war in Ukraine is over is going to be Vladimir Putin. And that's the end of it.
What a splendid call from a trucker hauling timber in Canada. This truly is the Open University of the airwaves, and it is global. Thanks, RB, for that. In response, I'd make these points in a provisional praise of Donald Trump. He definitely has put Netanyahu's nose out of joint. He has definitely ghosted Netanyahu. He didn't mention the word Israel last night in his hour-long speech in Riyadh, sandwiched between some cockamamie country and Western paean of praise to himself and the YMCA anthem at the end of it. But in between, the speech itself contained quite some number of interesting either new lines or lines that he hasn't struck since the campaign in 2016. For example, he lacerated the nation-building centrism of the Social Democrats in Washington and, by extension, in London and in the European Union. These nation builders, he said, their time was gone, that the United States was not intent on telling people how to live their lives, how to organize themselves. It was, if you like, an attack on the George Soros school of Americana, that everyone has to have the same system, the same attitudes to all kinds of issues, including issues that are plainly within the national sovereignty of countries themselves. And I found that quite an interesting, the venom with which, the energy with which he attacked the previous era of activist America, activist American government, was quite interesting. Secondly, as I say, he did not mention the word Israel. He's on a tour of the Middle East, but he's not going to Israel. Even Hegseth, the defense secretary, he literally stood the Israelis up. They were metaphorically waiting for him at the airport, if it was open, under Yemeni fire. I don't know these days when it's open, when it isn't. But they were, metaphorically speaking, waiting for the U.S. Defense Secretary, who abruptly cancelled going there and went to Saudi Arabia instead to join President Trump. So that was another slap in the face for Netanyahu. Trump is now quite consistently, by his standards, because this is a man that can contradict himself not only in the same day, but in the same interview. But by his standards, he has now quite consistently, over several days, kept up this rhetoric about the need to end the suffering in Gaza and the highlighting the famine, the complete catastrophe, an unprecedented catastrophe, not seen since 1945, the disaster that is Gaza. Netanyahu sure doesn't like that, because he is at the same time promising more and more and worse war, and promising there'll be no food, no medicine, no electricity, no medical facilities, no aid trucks coming into Gaza. So this is an apparent contradiction between Trump and Netanyahu. The State Department issued a proclamation today. I don't know why they did it, but it was a significant one. They said that the U.S. will not be a part of any departure of Palestinians from Gaza except voluntary. Now, of course, there's more than one way to bring about voluntary exile, a voluntary exodus. And so it's not a complete victory, but it is nonetheless another slap in the face to Netanyahu, who has no intention of waiting for volunteers to ethnically cleanse Gaza. He's prepared to machine gun people into leaving Gaza. Starve people to death if necessary in order to ethnically cleanse Gaza. So I thought the timing of that State Department proclamation and the wording of it was also of some interest. Now, we'll be talking in the second hour about all of this in any case, so stay tuned for that. 16,623 people have voted on the poll, should Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize. Again, the outlier is X. On Twitter, Trump is definitely more popular than he is elsewhere, though he's quite popular on the YouTube community poll also. It's a pretty overwhelming no so far, 16,623 votes in, that he should not win the Nobel Peace Prize, but a decent minority, at least on two of the platforms, for a yes vote. Let me take some comments now. Ramplens01 says the Hungarians trapped in Ukraine are being treated exactly like the Russian people of the Donbass. The Hungarian language has been banned. It's true. The Hungarian language was banned by Zelensky. Can't be used, can't be spoken by Hungarian people trapped in Ukraine since the end of the Second World War. The same is true for the Romanian speakers. Frank O'Mahony says, I feel that it's a bit early to ask whether Donald Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize. So do I, Frank. That's how I would have voted. Nigel Potter, 71, said, I voted no, but Trump may as well join the other mass murderers who won the Nobel Peace Prize, Obama, Kissinger, and Clinton. And Anderstuk, 3273, says that Nobel Peace Prize has become a giant joke after the nomination of Kissinger and Obama. And Crowhawk says, I wonder which Washington or Tel Aviv philanthropist was supposed to pick up the tab for Lammy's holiday. It's a real mystery, I must say. And I'm determined to get to the bottom of it. I warn you, Mr. Lammy. Let's take a call before the break from Eve in Florida on peace in the Middle East. Wouldn't that be a fine thing, Eve? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for having me on your show. I am a little bit less optimistic than you. I think that in 1991, United States had the following choice: to be the big superpower, but that means to be fair to its opponent and its ally, or be an unconditional supporter of Israel through genocide and crime against humanity. Unfortunately, the U.S. has chosen to be this kind of supporter of Israel, and therefore they don't obtain peace through strength, but they try to have peace through extortion and blackmail. And that's what they do, for instance, with Iran, where one day they negotiate about not having the bomb, the day after is not having enrichment, the day after is not having missile, the day after it's not supporting Yemen, the day after it's not supporting Lebanon, and it can go like that forever. And now, the big difference with Trump, and I think that's the only difference, is that he can price extortion. He can know how much it costs United States, how much Israel costs United States. At the time of Kissinger, Israel was costing 3 or 4 billion that you would give to Egypt to sign the peace treaty. Now, the dollar is threatened, and the reserve of the Middle East in oil are about $50 trillion, so they are bigger than the debt of the U.S. government. So he has to understand that he can control the Middle East by true peace only if he goes a little bit against Netanyahu. But I believe that the difference with his predecessor is just that he's pricing Israel, and the price to support Israel the way they do is absolutely exorbitant and will make United States bankrupt. That was my point.
Well, it's a point with which I agree. With Patrick Henningsen coming up, he has been deep diving into this whole matter over the last week or so, that this apparent breach between Trump and Netanyahu has been developing, if indeed it is real. So stay tuned, Eve, and we'll discuss that further in the course of the show. Now, you've been very generous this week, and it's now time to thank the top 5 big MOATS donors who've been onto the MOATS.tv website to support the show. Lynette Wells, Dennis Freeman, Michael Power, Poe Tham, and Adelio Solito. Please take a bow. Please do become a MOATS donor tonight and give what you can to support the show. You may not be able to match our top 5 big MOATS donors, the heroes of tonight's show so far, but leave £1, leave $1, leave €1. Come on, you're watching this show. It can't be brought to you for nothing. So please give on MOATS.tv. Let me take a quick break, and then it is the wise and eloquent geopolitical analyst, journalist, and host of Sunday Wire, Patrick Henningsen, coming up after this short break. Stay tuned. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, a go-to voice on international affairs, not just on the Middle East, though I want to concentrate on that with him this evening, but on broader geopolitical issues, is Patrick Henningsen, geopolitical analyst, journalist, host of Sunday Wire, joins us now. Patrick, wonderful to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's start with the orgy in Riyadh last night. When they broke into YMCA, I thought the kit was about to come off. It was something to behold, wasn't it?
I'm still speechless, George. It's just, there's so many different aspects of this that are so terribly wrong that it's hard to know where to start. I'll probably take your lead with some inquisitive questions on this, but I think the piece de la resistance of this whole conclave, I will call it neocon exhibitionism by Trump, because he's joined a very special club here. He's effectively completed the life's work of Hillary Clinton and John McCain in legitimizing al-Qaeda and ISIS, having a foothold, or Islamic State, right back in the middle of the Middle East. And it's, I think, a very bad move to have that photo op with al-Jolani, which he did. I don't think the problem, George, is here. We're talking, you and I understand these issues. We've been following this. We covered these issues in the Middle East for decades. And I don't think Donald Trump understands even 10% of what we're probably about to discuss. And that's the problem. Does he realize what he's done by shaking hands with the head of al-Qaeda in Syria, the deputy of al-Baghdadi, who's running pogroms as we speak in Syria against ethnic and religious minorities as we speak, and has effectively been rewarded, lifting sanctions. I mean, it's just unbelievable. There's so many different beneficiaries to this in the Gulf, between Qatar, who bankrolled the entire destabilization campaign of Syria, but it was a division of labor. Saudi played a role. Turkey played a role. Jordan played a role. Israel played a role. The United States, NATO countries played a role. France, Britain, they all played. Germany, the Netherlands, everybody who backed the white helmets and all of these, quote, civil society operations in Aleppo and northern Syria, they all played a role in this 14-year dirty war against Syria. And they're all sanctioning the EU, the United States. The sanctions that all these people cheered for, demanded sanctions be put for 14 years on Syria. And now the same people are celebrating that sanctions have been lifted. They never really cared about the Syrian people. Of course they didn't. But it just shows you that it's like the whole hypocrisy of this whole dirty episode, this whole epic is now laid bare. And Donald Trump was the man to do it. This is the final humiliation of America. In my, I mean, it's a bad photo op to be complimenting the head of al-Qaeda in Syria, saying what an attractive young man he is with a very strong past, said Trump. I don't know what to say. I'm speechless, George.
That goes to a point you made, and one does so reluctantly because one doesn't want to insult the United States by saying their president is an idiot, at least so close to the last guy who was certifiably an idiot by the end. But what can you say about a president of the United States whose only words about the deputy of al-Baghdadi and therefore co-founder of ISIS and previously the deputy of al-Zarqawi and deputy leader of al-Qaeda, when the only thing you can say to the cameras about him is that he's an attractive young man with a strong past? Well, what do you mean a strong past, Donald? Do you mean the deputy leader of the guy that knocked down the Twin Towers? Do you mean the deputy leader of the guy that cut Danielpearl's throat, that cut Kenbigley's throat on camera? I mean, couldn't you even say, well, look, we were the enemy of this guy, but we're ready to give him a chance? Couldn't you even acknowledge the pain of the victims of ISIS and al-Qaeda? Or did you not even know, did nobody tell you who this guy really is?
There's the bounty. The U.S. government had a bounty on this man's head just a couple of months ago for a number of things, for the slaughtering of Druze. Yeah, for the slaughtering of Druze, for the killing of American servicemen in Iraq, and the list goes on and on. And so where's Marco Rubio on this? Marco Rubio is a great crusader against global terror, apparently. They keep 5 minutes doesn't go by and they say Iran is the #1 sponsor of state terror in the world, which is a complete trope. But here you have an actual here you have the Islamic State that ISIS could never manage all those years when Assad was in power in Syria, and they finally got it. And everybody's just, well, it's not al-Qaeda anymore. This is the new president with no parliament. And, you know, there's a couple of things here that are a complete departure from precedent. One of them is whenever there's a coup or whenever there's a junta, and this is a terrorist junta effectively in Syria, the U.S. government, the British government, UN Security Council, their policy is to demand elections. Give us a date. You must have elections. That legitimizes the junta, if indeed it is a junta. But none of that. They've suspended that requirement for this guy, al-Sharar, a.k.a. al-Jolani, and also for Zelensky as well. There's no expectation of liberal democracy norms anymore. And that's, now this whole thing has become so transactional. And so Trump is basically turning a blind eye in order to give global capital access to the minerals, to the resources of Syria, They will privatize everything. They'll sell off everything. And in return for Jolani, who's not even an elected leader, to normalize relations with Israel as a top priority, but also just basically to open the gates to allow, and in exchange for that normalization, the U.S., Donald Trump, the U.S. government, Democrats and Republicans, the British government, the French, everybody will turn a blind eye to a Kristallnacht that is going on right now against Alawites and Christians. They're celebrating right now that they've got Trump has given them the green light, basically. And the violence domestically in Syria is unspeakable. In fact, the ISIS, the hardcore ISIS fighters that are in the prisons in Hasaka, that the Kurdish SDF forces have been guarding for these years, Trump's basically given Jolani now the green light to take over those prisons, 9,000 hardcore ISIS fighters. So the head of al-Qaeda is now taking over all these ISIS fighters that have been in prison. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be released? Will there be a magical jailbreak? Will they be given amnesty? What I will say, George, this will guarantee U.S. military presence in Syria indefinitely. That's my prediction.
Now, you mentioned Israel. Let's turn to that. I read your material assiduously. There's not a day goes by when I'm not checking out what you've got to say. Tell the viewers what you think is really going on between Trump and Netanyahu.
I think that was a kind of canary in the coal mine moment, because following this supposed spat between Netanyahu and Trump, that I had not seen any actual evidence for it. A lot of it's innuendo and very conveniently leaked stories in the Israeli press, by the way. But there is a political desire within Israel, a power struggle, seeing Netanyahu as a major political liability for the state of Israel. It's becoming an existential issue. So the internal political problems in Israel could destabilize the state as an international actor in this case, which would be very interesting. But if you look at the way the world's press has changed, you've seen a sea change in the narrative. Now all the major mainstream publications are acknowledging it's a genocide. Israel's gone too far. I mean, gosh, it's taken them long enough. We're in the 20th month now. But anyway, better late than never, I suppose. But there's clearly this acceptance across the establishment that Israel is beyond the pale now. And they would like to probably lay at the feet of Netanyahu. So maybe Trump is a sign of that Israel's become more of a liability than an asset for America, but the lobby is still heavily invested in the U.S. political system, and that's not going to be easy to extricate yourself from that, Democrats and Republicans. But you can see definitely a change when the media is changing en masse on this and shifting and pivoting. This is significant. It means that I think global capital wants to park money, assets, and investments in the region, and Israel is actually an impediment to that, which is interesting. Okay. Also, the situation in Syria, the instability there, that might also be an impediment to that. Certainly for the Qataris, any gas pipeline project they have planned. As well as all the other various pipelines and gas projects and so forth, canal projects, all sorts of things up for grabs in the region. But global capital can't, the Gulf states can't proceed forward with this massacre that the Israelis are carrying out against the Palestinians. But how this is going to end, I have no idea, George. I have no idea. So the U.S. Trump changes his mind every couple of days. What he says today might not be applicable on Monday.
And absolutely true. Josepborrell, the famous former foreign policy chief of the EU, famously described Europe as a garden, and by extension, everywhere else as a jungle that was seeking to encroach on the garden. Now that he's retired, he has explicitly stated this week that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. And as you say, there's this chorus now from the poshest people's papers all over the Western world. I think myself, if I were analyzing this apparent breach between Trump and Netanyahu, they're preparing to drop the pilot. They're preparing to bring down Netanyahu and replace him with a fresh coat of lipstick on the pig.
Yeah, I think so. But as we know, George, that the internal debate within Israel between, quote, liberals and the hard ethno-nationalist right, led by Smotrich and the Ben Gvirs of the world, the debate is whether to go for full-blown genocide or ethnic cleansing. That's the internal practical Zionist debate within Israel, which isn't much of a debate when you consider the welfare of the native Palestinian population. But that's kind of where it's at. And you're right, they would love to basically make a lot of this bad toxicity die with Netanyahu's political career. And certainly within Israel, that suits them. Washington too, Europe definitely. And then basically carry on. What is the next phase? What is the next phase? Israel has committed to total warfare in Gaza now, and resuming total warfare. And you know what that's going to entail. And they want to make it so unlivable that there's no option for it's already unlivable. But they even bombed the European hospital. European International Hospital was bombed just a couple of days ago. And it's no medical, no education, no water, no food. It's still under siege. It's just ridiculous. But Trump gets on stage in Saudi Arabia and gives this speech about, they're treating them so bad in Gaza, the hostages or whatever, as if compare the Palestinians kidnapped and put in Israeli gulags and what they look like if they're alive when they're released. If they're released at all. And you look at the condition, the physical health, and the high spirits of the Israeli captives high-fiving Hamas on their way out before they're released. I mean, Trump is lying. And he's also lying. He sits there in front of MBS and says, we want to see this wonderful region, and the countries in the region are charting their own destiny, and we don't want to see them bomb each other. And the U.S. just got done with a 7-week bombing campaign against Yemen just last week. What's Trump talking about? The U.S. is bombing the countries of the Middle East. The U.S. armed Saudi Arabia, who carried out an 8-year war against their neighbor Yemen. So what is Trump talking about? None of this means anything. These speeches are just so vacuous and so hollow. They don't correspond to reality at all. And it just of course, it looks good. It sounds good. Neocons, Fox News audience, they don't care. It sounds, it's great. It's really great. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, is sitting there wearing a suit next to MBS, and he's got a tattoo that says infidel in Arabic on his right bicep. The defense secretary. I mean, so where are the Saudis on any of this? These are people who hate Muslims, who openly proselytize for rebuilding the Third Temple in Jerusalem. That means demolishing Al-Aqsa, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So between Trump and the Gulf and this circus in Syria and Israel, I mean,
we're all used to fixating now on Gaza, but the cabinet this week has effectively declared the intention to annex the West Bank. They have literally taken control of Area C, which was supposed to be, under the terms of the Oslo Agreement, under the control of the putative Palestinian state in the two-state solution that every Western government claims still to be committed to. Every Western government except the US, that is. So, in fact, if the polarity, if the dichotomy is between Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and Smotrich, it's between bad and worse. And there's no real sign of any other political force with any other level of political support in Israel that might be able to be the new lipstick. Maybe, I don't know, what, a military coup or something in Israel? How are they going to get out of this conundrum that the only potential leaders of Israel other than Netanyahu are people who are even worse than him?
And arguably, George, Benny Gantz is going to be no better than Benjamin Netanyahu, effectively. I mean, he's unleashed the most violent, operations on Gaza as anybody has in his career. So it's just like choose between Ariel Sharon, Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, 6.5 dozen of the other. And the problem that you have with this situation is Donald Trump took a very big check from Miriam Adelson, which is almost like a down payment on the annexation of the West Bank. And that was Trump's first term, was he de facto recognized that the West Bank was Israel, the Golan Heights was Israel. And while all the action is happening in Gaza, we saw in the last 18 months, a lot of action was happening in the West Bank, but didn't garner any headlines. But they have made great strides in ethnic cleansing, in making life increasingly unlivable in the West Bank. And they believe in Israel that they're close to the finish line. They want to, Netanyahu certainly would like to, for his legacy, to see this project complete during his lifetime. And they think they're in the final phase right now. They've killed enough people in Gaza that if they just kill a few more, that they'll leave. They can push them into Egypt or Jordan or whatever. Same in the West Bank if that kicks off. What's the U.S. going to do? How are they going to restrain Israel? If Israel goes more aggressively in the West Bank, what's the U.S. going to do? Nothing. What are the Democrats going to do? Nothing. They don't care. What's the U.K.? What's Britain going to do? Nothing. What are the French going to do? Nothing. What are the Germans going to do? The Germans, the third biggest provider of military support to Israel, nothing. They're so locked into supporting Israel and attacking people that are protesting against the genocide in Germany. Germany is so obsessed with atoning for their historical guilt that they're willing to atone down to the last Palestinian. That's where Germany's at right now. There's nothing.
Yeah.
There is nothing. So where's it going to come from?
Mind you, Patrick, mind you, Adelson's check is long ago spent. The kings of Arabia wrote far, far bigger checks last night and this afternoon. Maybe Trump's just following the money.
Yeah. This is a big transaction. So it's interesting because Trump is following the money, George. But if you listen to, for instance, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, comments that he's made during this meeting, how important it is for them to resolve the Iran nuclear issue. They want a security architecture for the region. Okay, very important, high priority for Saudi Arabia. They want the stability. They've got projects, they've got plans, they've got NEOM, they've got all these things on the burner. They can't afford to have the whole region. Israel wouldn't mind if the whole region exploded into Hades, but Saudi certainly is not going to benefit from that. So they have the leverage on Trump because they've promised direct foreign investment to bail out the U.S. economy. The UAE and Saudi Arabia, $2.4 trillion between those two countries. So Trump has actually put himself in a corner. That the Gulf Arabs, ironically, are able to go over the head of Israel right now and to the front of the queue at the door of Uncle Sam. And so this is one of the things that's going to bail out the U.S. economy. And it's going to help to stabilize the dollar. It's going to put liquidity back into Wall Street.
Fascinating. As always, Patrick Henningsen, thanks for joining us. Host of Sunday Wire and a must-follow on social media. Thank you, Patrick. Should Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize? Well, on Telegram, 89% say no. On X, 63% say no, 37% say yes. On the YouTube community poll, 76% say no. And on the YouTube stream, 83% say no. So you've still got about 5-10 minutes left to vote, but it looks like a pretty powerful no. Let me take a quick break, then Gayatri with the social media news roundup. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
It is extraordinary when the top 10 in Mexico, in Malaysia, in Egypt, in South Africa, and knocking on the door of the top 20 in India. Can you imagine the number of podcasts there are in India? We're in the top 70 in the UK for politics. We're getting great numbers on last week's Moscow show, which I know that you all enjoyed. And you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen. Now, you can also listen to the weekly podcast via the MOATS.tv website. And once you've listened, please make sure you rate it. Make sure you give it a thumbs up. Just while I'm waiting for the next call to come through, let me develop further the point I've just been making with Patrick Henningsen, that it's not because I support Trump, very far from it, that I say I believe there is a wedge that is very clear, becoming ever clearer, between Netanyahu as an individual and Trump as an individual. Now, you may say, what do individuals matter in high politics? Well, they matter to a remarkable extent, a far greater extent than you can imagine, especially when you have such a vainglorious braggart as Donald Trump as the President of the United States. I mean, I watched in great detail, not just didn't just listen to the words, I watched the body language. Donald Trump last night was, his knees were knocking together in pleasure, if you get my meaning. This man was basking in an orgy of adulation from the Arab audience that was in front of him. And because he was so high on it, he was becoming loose-lipped. He was becoming loose-tongued. And it seemed obvious to me that he has pledged his troth not to Miriam Adelson, whose eaten bread is long forgotten, but to the kings and the emirs in the Gulf. And we'll see who's right about that. Angel is in Tennessee on the Nobel Peace Prize issue. Angel, what would you like to say?
Hi, George. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Such an honor. I wanted to say that...
Thank you, ma'am.
You made some good points. I wanted to address those first because people got on me for voting for Jill Stein, but I stand by the fact that Trump would be better than Biden, because with Kamala or Biden in charge...
Me too.
this wouldn't be happening at all because they're so ideologically tied to Israel. And as you rightly said, George, Trump is very transactional. He's a businessman. He's a deal maker, and he loves the adulation. And as you also said, $100 million is gone from Miriam Edelson. He just got a $400 million jumbo jet, a 747-8I from Qatar for his exclusive use as a presidential plane. I think he just was handed a new shiny object.
That's exactly right, Angel. There is this Irish phrase that I use, eaten bread is soon forgotten. Once you've eaten the bread, the guy who gave you the bread is soon forgotten because there's more richly buttered bread ahead from other people. And that's honestly how I see it, Angel.
George, and when it comes to the Nobel Peace Prize, I want to agree with a previous comment that you just got about Kissinger and Jimmy Carter, who collectively are responsible for 3 million deaths from Chile to Cambodia. And if they can get it, I would say that he should get it if he does actually follow through with a Palestinian state. I think that would be deserving.
Yeah, well, I mean, how bad do you have to be to get the Nobel Peace Prize is the obvious question that arises. They say that Sattar died when Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize, but I would say Barack Obama winning the Nobel Peace Prize 6 weeks after he took office, when he went on to make war in 6 different countries, I think, if I've remember that number correctly. It might even be more. The Peace Prize isn't worth the adulation that people give it. And if some of these people are entitled to it, then why not Donald Trump? But there's a big if, Angel. He's talked peace with Iran. He's talked peace with Yemen. He's talked peace on the Israel-Palestine question. He's talked peace on the Russia-Ukraine question. But there is actually no peace as yet in any of these theaters. And we need to know, we need to see whether Trump is all mouth and no trousers. We want to see some trousers, Donald. Thanks, Angel, in Tennessee, for a perfectly angelic call. Let me take some more comments. Jack Klugman, great name, says not one Christian leader or church has said a peep about the Israel occupation force guided hits with AI house to house, destroying the oldest Christian communities on earth. And Antonio Cristoforo says the Germans murdered 6 million Jews, and so Jews can do no wrong. Germany murdered 27 million Russians, but Russians can't do no good. Germany is unbalanced, still Nazi. And Karaoke Stars says, I feel sorry for genuine Jews who wish no harm. They will be condemned by the Zionist regime of Netanyahu. And Ange says, Trump, like the rest, are owned by genocidal maniacs and Israeli terrorists and war criminals. Trump took $100 million. He's full of hot air. He hasn't done anything to help the Palestinians or to stop Israel. And Zilla Burns says, I don't think Trump snubbed Netanyahu. He's only fooling the Arabs to come round with the Abraham Accords and is still a huge supporter of Netanyahu. Simon, the legend from Weaponized News, has got some breaking news for us. Go ahead, Simon.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience once again. I would like to point out that IMEC was announced at the G20 in New Delhi, and that was the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, and not one brick or stone has been laid to that end ever since. So 2.4 trillion or 600 billion, or however you're counting it, is a very long-term scheme with a very short-term announcement for some good publicity. But we'll wait to see if any of that actually comes to fruition, particularly bearing in mind that it was a great distraction whilst President Xi was hosting the 10th CELAC, which is the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, China 10th Forum in Beijing, at which he tried to rally the global south against hegemonism and trade protectionism. But he also proposed the full implementation for all 33 countries who America otherwise thinks are covered by the Monroe Doctrine, to fully implement the Global Security Initiative, Global Development Initiative, and Global Civilizational Initiative, all the personal pet projects for the last 10 or 12 years of President Xi. Full implementation of those, hot off his successes with the African Union last year at the China AU Forum. So that would add up to a total of about 88 countries. So not 3 Middle Eastern ones, but 88 for all aspects of development, their role in the global civilization, and also in security matters. So we're all watching the Trump shiny ball, as sparkly as it is, but as usual, there's a great deal going on the periphery.
Absolutely. It was sparkly, though, but I take your point absolutely, Simon, as always. From weaponized news, bringing us that useful antidote to any hysteria coming out of the YMCA show. A big shout out to tonight's top donors who've been onto the MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Emily Rose, Maria Povey, Lee Sexton, Charles E. Cartwright, and Marcel Hayden. A huge thanks to each and every one of you for these generous donations, and those that are merely donating the minimum are equally necessary. So please don't leave tonight without leaving $1, €1, or £1 at the minimum. Now, my old friend and legend, Tommy in Glasgow, is no longer in Glasgow. He's actually in the inner sanctum of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Palestine. And he's on the line here on the mother of all talk shows. Go on yourself, Tommy. How is it?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother. How are you doing tonight? Yourself. Hopefully yourself.
Oh, good. It's been a good show. But I was amazed at your pictures from inside the Al-Aqsa are remarkable. How on earth did you get there? How did a Glasgow man get there?
By the grace and will and guidance of Allah and God. I was here last year. At the same time, you went to see the late St. Francis, I call him St. Francis, Pope Francis, maybe will be a saint soon. And I'm not inside
he will
it
be,
just now.
God willing, yeah.
There was a picture. I went to the beautiful holy town of Bethlehem in the West Bank earlier today, and I took a picture and posted it, and they salute the Holy Papa. Sadly, I'm not in the inner sanctum. I was earlier on, but I was waiting. I was desperate to come on, but I was the last person to leave to go through, causing the Zionist police security to wait for me to get ushered out, and I walked nice and slow, take it easy, no rush here. But alhamdulillah. And how did I get there? Because you're my leader for Palestine when it comes to, for years, decades, 5 decades, 50 years or more, you have been championing the cause of Palestine. Before I was a nipper, but when I was a boy, and what was Palestine? I learned it from you. You were my leader, and you are my leader. What you know about Palestine, what you forgot about Palestine, most people don't even know, but you've led people like me. You helped me gain knowledge about Palestine, want me to, and build my love slowly but surely. And when you went and seen Pope Francis last year, I made it here last year, and I remember talking exactly a year ago, just one day later, I think it was the 15th, but yeah, on the Wednesday the 15th last year, and I spoke to the great Jackson Hinkle because you were meeting El Papa. Anyway, yeah, I was in there today. The first prayer, the second prayer of the day, Zohar prayer, I tried to get in there, and by the grace and will of God, do you know what happened? The Zionist pig actually pushed me. He pushed me away. He said, do you want to have a go? Thinking it was a big hard man with a big gun. Is it a Glaswegian? Yeah, I want to have a go, but I said I want to go in there. I want to go into the masjid, you muppet. Never said muppet, but I said, yeah, I want to have a go. I want to go into the masjid. And he pushed me again. And alhamdulillah, he pushed me again. But anyway, sabr, as the Arabic say, patience. Have patience. There's more one way to skin a cat. I went through another couple checkpoints. One even had the chutzpah to say to me in a funny accent, go back to the UK. Anyway, finally, alhamdulillah, with a bit of patience, sabr, persistence, I managed to get in and read my Zohar prayer by the skin of my teeth. And what a blessed sanctuary it is. And I'm on here to try and encourage many people to come. The Christian, today I went to Bethlehem, Church of Nativity. It was a pilgrimage on behalf of my great-grandfather and grandmother, may they rest in peace. And my mother, who's quite sick, and she kept saying, I wish I could be their son. And she was, because in spirit through me, being in there and, being a Christian, following the belief. I mean, Muslims hold Isa, Jesus, he's as much as an Islamic, he's a prophet, and we love him. And Miriam, the mother of Jesus, is held in such high stature in Islam. And these people, these Palestinian people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, Al-Quds, the suffering and pain and indignity they have to face on a daily basis, on the bus back from Bethlehem, all off the bus to stand in line to show our passport and back on, and the stupid Nazi Zionist pokes his head in and looks at them, and then on you go, and standing and looking at the wall, and looking at the wall, the indignity of it, of how they treat these beautiful people, and they are beautiful people. So my call out tonight to you, our great leader, and what the show, you have decimated the industry of news, the liars, and you're a bastion for truth, and your show, alhamdulillah, all praise for God, and give you strength to carry on, all the great listeners. And I said a special dua, a special supplication for you, George, for your family, for all the listeners out there. Okay. And I'm asking and I'm praying that many of the listeners, if you're Muslim, last night, I'll give you a wee bit of a thing, I don't know, will the sirens go off? And I heard there was a bang there, but the sirens go off, and I thought it was the police. I said, no, that's a Houthis sending stuff in. But yesterday, and the police are pretty so-called strict, but yesterday I came out one of the prayer halls, and there was the police, and there was a guy who was actually, he was from America, saying to me, and I said, well, listen, why do you ask if I'm Muslim when you're allowing these people to go through? But 2 days before that, there was actually a settler Zionist come in, or tried to come in, armed with knives and a sheep, to slaughter a sheep, because what their goal is obviously to slaughter the heifer cow, and what their plan for that is, either of the ashes for the cow that they burn, they rub it on them, and that's they're supposed to be cleansed of sin, and then that, stuff like that. What all I'm calling out to do for the Muslims, if you've not been to Masjid al-Aqsa, you need to get your finger out. It's not for Palestine, it's for the Muslim Ummah, it's for the people who are Islamic. You must go. You must go, please, for the love of God, go. It was the first sanctuary where Muslims prayed to for 16 months. It's the place where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven and came down with 124,000 prophets of Allah, of God, and read prayer. It's a place where Christians, I went to the Holy Sepulchre, where the Zionists bullied and hit the lovely people. I was in there yesterday seeing the Christian of various denominations. Christians, the businesses are suffering. The people need you. I hear stories all the time from a Muslim brother saying, we can't go there in case we support the Zionists. You can come in by the Jordan way and you can limit your exposure to the Zionists and support these people, because the businesses are suffering. But most importantly, the sanctuary of this place where I was standing when I phoned you earlier on, alhamdulillah, I've been so blessed to come for the second time, as our Muslims out there have not even been for the first time. When you say just 2 rakats in one of the masjids, it's like you are a new baby. And alhamdulillah, I said my dua there for you, brother, and all power to you. How did I get there? by the grace of God and by you being a leader of Palestine, not for me, but for everyone out there. Alhamdulillah, all praise for you, George. Takbir. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. George Galloway, you're the man. Keep it going. All power to you. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Everyone go to Masjid al-Aqsa. Everyone defend the faith. Fight against the Satanahu, the Satanists that are out there. Defend the holy sanctuaries. Are you there, Christian? Are you there, Muslim? Stand with us. George, lead the way, brother. Alhamdulillah.
Well, I'm knocked out by that call from Holy Jerusalem. Tommy, thank you very much indeed for the kind words that you said. It makes me proud that you consider me to have led many people, not with the same zeal as you, not who converted to Islam. That's not good luck to you, of course, but that's not necessary. You can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be just a human being and be right behind the Palestinian cause. If you're still hearing me, Tommy, pop in to Salahuddin Street, to the Philadelphia restaurant, if it's still there, and see if Abu Walid, who used to serve me my dinner in Jerusalem, is still around. I think maybe his son is running the restaurant now, the Philadelphia restaurant in Salahuddin Street. God bless you, Tommy, and keep you safe. Let's take now the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Oh, good. There's always a very passionate call from Tommy in Glasgow, or in Jerusalem, rather, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm speechless by what he was saying.
Amazing. He shared some wonderful pictures on Twitter as well. Oh, by the way, guys, people will misunderstand this, honey. This is a tissue, by the way. This is really a tissue. Nothing in it. Don't worry.
What was that all about?
Well, what was that all about? How can we know? Because did you know that TikTok has restricted the search engine looking everything linked to the controversial video featuring Macron. Yes.
It was only a tissue. It was only a sugar spoon. Yeah.
So, yes, on TikTok you can no longer find that video or anything related to it, but you know what we're talking about. But this is luckily just a tissue. But Andy Hanlon says, George, the posturing of Starmer, Macron and all over Ukraine is more like a coalition of the desperate and irrelevant. It seemed that way, didn't it? Especially in the same week that Putin was hosting the Victory Day parade with all the world leaders.
I hope so. A lot of you included, are more optimistic about the balance of force in the world than I am. Of course, I recognize the inevitability of the new world that is being born, but I'm by no means certain that the old world is anywhere yet near death.
No, not near death. It may have found new life in the way Trump presented himself yesterday.
Well, he certainly gave a shot in the arm to the U.S. economy, I think.
Yeah,
yesterday.
as you said, he was really basking in lots and lots of gold and dollars in Saudi
it was pretty
Arabia.
vulgar. The whole staging was pretty vulgar. The cavalcades are pretty vulgar. And he seemed to have... I don't want to use the word because family audience and all that. He seemed terribly excited by the towers. He kept talking about all these glass towers, these tall towers that, of course, many people believe are a sign of the end of times.
End of times, yeah.
But he seemed to love it. There's nothing about towers I don't know, he said.
No.
Getting ready for a Trump tower, here, there, and everywhere. Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Coming to you very soon, the whole Arab region.
Yeah.
So Angela in Glastonbury says, a brilliant monologue as ever. How do you do it, George? Week after week, always eloquent, always incisive, and always hilarious, even in the face of such evil in this world. So thank you for standing for truth and keeping us all informed and sane. Thank you, Angela in Glastonbury. Now, should Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize with his performance yesterday? It was really, as Patrick Henningsen says...
He should get an Oscar, at least.
At least, yeah, because it was really all transactional, isn't it? wherever the dollars, wherever he gets more money, that's where he will go. Mike says, well, he walked through the DMZ between North and South Korea to meet with the North Korean leader to normalize relations between the two warring nations.
In the last term.
And for that alone, he should have gotten the prize. The fact that he didn't and Obama did proves how worthless the prize really is.
Maybe. I think he should go back to North Korea and he should do more than cross the line next time. He should go to Pyongyang.
Yeah.
If he likes these big celebrations and ecstatic welcomes, Pyongyang's your place, you know, Don.
Joan Moore says, we all know that it is a meaningless prize since they've given it to Kissinger, the warmonger, and Obama, even before he bombed 7 countries. So yeah, let Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize. He is just as deserving as Kissinger and Obama. And best of all, it will make many people uncomfortable, who should be. Maybe it will finally be realized that the Nobel Peace Prize is meaningless and this is a new and cynical era. A travesty. But
maybe. Let's see if we get any peace. I mean, at this moment, we're getting lots of talk about peace, but no actual peace. He said he'd solve the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours. Well, it's 4 months now, Don, and your man, Zelensky, is still behaving as provocatively and aggressively as ever. And by dragging you into what I suspect will be the circus in Istanbul tomorrow, he's made peace less likely, not more.
Yeah, interesting that actually the focus of arena has now become the Middle East rather than the Russia-Ukraine front, as we all expected.
Yeah. Even these talks are in Turkey, in Istanbul. We were almost headed for Istanbul.
Yeah.
But we really have to put some time into the kids, yeah?
Yeah, it's been a long journey, so we'll be back soon, kids. Carl Morris says, well, I have seen it all now. A genocide of Palestinians by coming, shooting, and starvation. Potential coke-addled EU leaders. And if it wasn't enough, Trump, the U.S. president, shaking hands with the head-chopping U.S. killer with his own hands, former Al-Qaeda Supremo. Unbelievable.
What is? It's not unbelievable that he shook his hand, because in the end, all the so-called terrorists end up as statesmen and taking tea with the Queen, we used to say, now the King, at Buckingham Palace. Makarios, all kinds of revolutionaries, guerrilla leaders, one man's freedom fighter, another man's terrorist. They all end up in the end having to be shaken hands with. But what was amazing to me is that Trump made no mention of his past, but rather described it as a strong past. What, you mean like he strongly cut people's throats?
Tough guy.
Yeah, tough guy. He toughly cut out American hearts. He toughly murdered American and British and other hostages. Is that how you describe somebody that did that? If he'd said, look, this guy's done some terrible things, but we are where we are and he's now in control and I'm going to lift the sanctions in the hope that the country, but I've warned them, no more killing Christians. If he'd done that kind of a rap, it would have at least been understandable. But he now looks like an idiot in those statements he was making.
Because everyone can pull up that wanted picture. That
$10 million.
Wanted
7
picture.
weeks ago. 7 weeks ago, your government, Donald Trump, was going to give somebody $10 million if they captured this guy alive. And now you're describing him as an attractive young guy.
Tough guy.
Tough guy. I mean, Biden had the excuse that he was an imbecile. What's your excuse, Don?
Businessman, deal maker. So finally, let me just give credits to the Yemeni people, whom he also brokered some kind of deal with, all without mentioning Israel. Did you see the spokesperson of the defense ministry with a very British accent rubbishing these facts as opinions or Hamas propaganda? on Sky News. Oh, these are all opinions. These are all opinions. No, it's a fact that Israel was not mentioned, that Israel was sidelined. Trump done this all without them. So, yeah.
Trump praised they were called terrorists one day, and the next day he said they were brave, honourable men. He respected them. But to be fair, he pulled out of the war with Yemen, though that may have been because of the increasing accuracy of the Yemeni armaments. These tribes people certainly know how to fight, and you can send as many aircraft carriers or B-2 bombers as you like. You're never going to defeat or break the people of Yemen. They are literally unbreakable.
They are. And in support of that, in conclusion, Angela Powell says, I just want to say that I stand with the people of Yemen and their army, one of the poorest countries in the world, who are fighting for their brothers and sisters in Palestine against the U.S. and its friends. And I'm glad to say they're treating them to a BGH, a bloody good hiding.
Well, God bless the people of Yemen, for sure. God bless all of you for tuning in tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as we have enjoyed presenting it, and that you'll come back on Sunday with another viewer, if possible, because algorithm does his best every week to try and suppress our audience. It's just under 4 million in the last 7 days. And I don't want to be falling below 4 million. So I need you to persuade one other person to watch the show on Sunday at 7 o'clock. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.